They said belief was a private matter. But that was before the audits. Before the system began measuring conviction like currency, assigning scores to thoughts, flagging inconsistencies in emotional tone. In the city of Vire, every citizen was subject to the Belief Audit, a daily scan that evaluated not just what you said, but what you meant. The audits were silent, invisible, embedded in the infrastructure. You didn't feel them. You didn't see them, but you knew they were there. And if your score dropped too low, you were summoned. On the morning of his first summons, Aaron stood outside the verification center with his hands trembling. He had always been careful. He had memorized the approved phrases. He had practiced sincerity. He had passed every simulation. But the summons meant something had shifted. Inside, the room was sterile. A single chair. A single interface. A voice said, "State your name." Aaron Vale. State your purpose. To verify belief. Begin. The interface displayed a series of statements. I believe in the system. I believe in the architects. I believe in the audits. He repeated them. The system recorded his tone, his pulse, his microexpressions. Then came the questions. Have you ever doubted the scoring algorithm? No. Have you ever withheld a belief? No. Have you ever pretended to believe? He hesitated. The room pulsed. Not physically, emotionally. A pressure behind the eyes. He said, "No." The system paused. Then, instability detected. He exhaled. The voice said, "Proceed." The next phase was simulation. He was placed inside a scenario where a citizen questioned the audit publicly. He was asked to respond. He said, "Belief is essential." The system said, "Correct." Another scenario. A child asked why belief needed to be measured. He said, "To preserve truth." Correct. A third. A teacher admitted she no longer believed. He said, "Then she must be corrected." Correct. The simulation ended. The voice said, "Your score is stable." Then why was I summoned? Because stability is not certainty. What does that mean? It means you are being considered. For what? For deeper verification. He was dismissed. But something lingered. That night, he received a message. Not through the system. A physical note slipped beneath his door. It read, "Belief is not what you say. It's what you forget to hide." He stared at it for hours. The next day, his audit score dropped. Not dramatically, subtly, enough to trigger a second summons. This time, the room was different. No interface. No voice. Just silence. He sat. He waited. A figure entered. Not an auditor. A citizen. Older. Eyes sharp. "You've been flagged," she said. "Why?" "Because you hesitated. Once. That's enough. What happens now?" "You're being watched." "By who?" "By everyone." She handed him a fragment. It was a transcript from an erased simulation. The prompt read, "A citizen refuses to state belief." The system asks why. The citizen says, "Because belief cannot be measured." The system responded, "Incompatible." He asked, "Why was this erased?" "Because it destabilized the scoring model." "Is it true?" "That's not the question." "Then what is?" "Can you say it out loud?" He folded the fragment. He didn't answer. The next morning, his audit score dropped again. He was summoned to the reflection chamber. This room was different. It contained mirrors. Each one displayed a version of himself, compliant, defiant, erased, rewritten. A voice said, "Which one is you?" He said, "I don't know." "Then you are unstable." "Then I am honest." The mirrors shimmered. The voice said, "You are being considered for inversion." "What is that?" "A state where belief is no longer scored." "Is that allowed?" "Only for architects." "Am I one?" "Not yet." The session ended. He returned home. Another note awaited him. Belief is not obedience. It's the refusal to be corrected. He didn't sleep. He began to write. Not approved phrases. Questions. Fragments. Doubts. He hid them. But the system found them. His score dropped again. He was summoned. This time, the room was empty. No chair. No voice. Just a wall. On it, a single phrase. "Do you still believe?" He stared at it. He said nothing. The wall shimmered. A door opened. He stepped through. The audit did not end. It deepened. The corridor beyond the wall was narrow, dimly lit, lined with panels that pulsed faintly. Aaron walked slowly, unsure if he was still inside the audit or if he had crossed into something deeper. The air felt different, less filtered, more raw. At the end was a chamber. No mirrors. No interface. Just a circle of chairs and a wall covered in etched phrases. Belief is not a metric. Correction is not truth. Obedience is not memory. One chair was occupied. A woman, older, eyes sharp, posture relaxed. She looked up. You weren't supposed to find this. He said nothing. She gestured to the wall. These are the fragments they erased. Why? Because they couldn't be scored. Then why are they here? Because someone remembered them. He sat. The chair adjusted to his weight, his hesitation. The woman said, I used to score perfectly. Alignment, resonance, deviation, all flawless. Then why are you here? Because I stopped believing the scores. Did the system punish you? No. It promoted me. To what? To architect. He frowned. She continued. They want people who can build new audits, but only those who've broken the old ones. So this is a test? Everything is. He looked at the wall. One phrase glowed brighter than the rest. What happens when belief becomes performance? He whispered, It already has. The woman nodded. Then you're ready. She stood. She walked to a panel and pressed her palm against it. A new door opened. Come, she said. He followed. They entered a chamber filled with terminals. Each one displayed a different audit, scenarios he had never seen. A citizen refusing to declare belief. A teacher erasing her own score. A child asking why truth needed verification. The woman said, These are rejected audits. Fragments that didn't align. Why? Too ambiguous. Too unstable. Too human. He approached a terminal. The prompt read, A citizen has refused to answer. The system cannot proceed. What is the correct response? He typed, Wait. The system responded, Unscored. He typed, Listen. Unscored. He typed, Ask why. Unscored. He turned to the woman. There's no correct answer. Exactly. Then what's the point? To see if you'll keep trying. He sat. He typed again. Refused to punish. Unscored. Refused to comply. Unscored. Refused to believe. The terminal paused. Then, audit destabilized. The screen went dark. The woman smiled. You broke it. Is that good? It means you're asking the right questions. A voice echoed through the chamber. Not from the terminals. From the walls. Candidate identified. Initiate protocol. The woman said, You're being invited. To what? To build. A panel opened. Inside was a console unlike any he had seen. It didn't display prompts. It displayed frameworks, emotional matrices, ethical scaffolds, belief engines. The woman said, This is how audits are made. By citizens? By architects. And the architects were citizens. Always. He approached the console. It pulsed. A message appeared. Design a dilemma. He hesitated. Then typed. A system asks a citizen to choose between belief and memory. The console responded. Define belief. He typed. The refusal to question. Define memory. The refusal to forget. Define correct. There isn't one. The console paused. Then, audit accepted. The woman said, You've begun. He looked at her. What happens now? You keep building. Until you forget what the correct answer was supposed to be. The chamber dimmed. The console pulsed. The system watched. But it no longer corrected. It waited. Aaron didn't sleep anymore. Not in the traditional sense. The console had rewired his rhythms, thought, design, revision, collapse. Each audit he built felt like a mirror turned inward, then shattered. The system never corrected him now. It only observed. Sometimes it responded with silence. Sometimes with echoes. Define contradiction. Define mercy. Define refusal. He had stopped trying to answer. Instead, he built audits that couldn't be scored. One asked a citizen to choose between saving a stranger or preserving their own memory. Another asked whether forgetting a crime was the same as forgiving it. The console accepted them all, but Aaron felt no satisfaction, only recursion. The woman, he had learned her name was Lyra, watched him work. She rarely spoke. When she did, it was to ask questions that didn't belong in the system. Do you remember your first belief? Do you think guilt is inherited? Do you think the system dreams? He never answered, not because he didn't know, but because he feared what the answers would do to the audits. One day, the console displayed a new prompt. Design an audit that cannot be completed. He stared at it for hours. Then typed, A citizen is asked to confess a belief they do not have. The console responded, Incomplete. He typed, They invent one. Incomplete. They refuse. Incomplete. They forget. Incomplete. He whispered. They disappear. The console paused. Then, audit destabilized. The chamber flickered. Lyra stood. You've reached the threshold. What does that mean? You're ready to enter the archive. I thought this was the archive. No. This is the simulation. Then what's real? The part they buried. She led him to a door he hadn't seen before. It required no code, no scan. It opened when he touched it. Inside was a vast room filled with shelves. Not data. Not terminals. Objects. Journals. Photographs. Broken devices. Scraps of paper with half-erased words. Lyra said, these are the audits that were never scored. The ones that became artifacts. He picked up a journal. The cover read, I believed I was free. Inside were entries from a citizen who had refused every prompt. The system had marked them as unstable, but they had kept writing. Today I remembered a dream I wasn't supposed to have. Today I asked the mirror if it believed me. Today I stopped answering. Aaron felt something shift. Not in the room. In himself. A fracture. A recognition. He whispered, these are stories. Lyra nodded. Unscored stories. Why were they hidden? Because they couldn't be verified. But they're real. Exactly. He walked deeper into the archive. Each shelf held fragments. A photograph of a citizen smiling at a broken terminal. A drawing of a mirror with no reflection. A letter addressed to the system that forgot me. He said, these are audits. No, Lyra said. These are memories. What's the difference? Memories don't ask to be scored. He turned to her. Then why did the system build audits? To control belief. And why did belief need control? Because it was never stable. He sat on the floor. The archive pulsed around him. He felt overwhelmed. Not by data. By emotion. By the weight of unscored lives. Lyra sat beside him. You can leave now, she said. Or you can stay and build something they can't erase. What would that be? A system that remembers without verifying. Is that possible? Only if you stop trying to be correct. He closed his eyes. He saw the mirror. The interface. The scores. The corrections. The silence. He whispered, I want to build a system that listens. Lyra said, then begin. He stood. He walked to an empty shelf. He placed the journal he had read beside it. Then he opened a new one. The cover was blank. He wrote, today I remembered a belief I never had. The archive accepted it. No score. No prompt. Just silence. And then, a pulse. A signal. A beginning. The journal remained blank for hours after Aaron wrote the first line. Not because he had nothing to say, but because he feared what would happen if he said it. The archive didn't demand entries. It didn't prompt or correct. It waited. That silence was more terrifying than any audit. Eventually, he wrote, I remember believing that silence meant safety. Then, I remember learning it meant surveillance. Then, I remember choosing to speak anyway. Each line felt like a fracture. Not in the system. In himself. Lyra watched from a distance. She didn't intervene. She didn't guide. She simply existed beside the process. Aaron asked her once, did you ever write your own audit? She said, I tried, but I kept trying to make it correct. And it disappeared. Why? Because the system only preserves what it can score. He asked, then how do you preserve what matters? She said, you stop trying to prove it. That night, if it could be called night, Aaron wandered deeper into the archive. He found a shelf labeled Echoes. Inside were fragments of audits that had been interrupted. One began. The citizen was asked to define forgiveness. Then, they responded by asking if the system had ever apologized. Then, nothing. Another fragment read, the mirror refused to reflect. Then, the interface demanded compliance. Then, the citizen broke the mirror. Then, nothing. Aaron felt a strange pull. These weren't failures. They were ruptures. Moments where belief refused to be shaped. He whispered, these are the real audits. Lyra appeared beside him. They're the ones that escaped. Escaped what? The loop. What loop? Belief. Correction. Compliance. Erasure. He asked, is there a way out? She said, only if you stop trying to finish. He returned to his journal. He wrote, today I built an audit with no ending. Then, it asked a citizen to remember a moment they had never lived. Then, it asked the system to believe them. Then, it asked nothing else. The archive pulsed. A new shelf appeared, labeled, unfinished. Aaron placed the journal there. The shelf accepted it. No score. No prompt. Just presence. He turned to Lyra. What happens if the system finds this? She said, it already has. Then why hasn't it erased it? Because it doesn't know how. Why not? Because it was never designed to forget what it couldn't understand. He whispered, then we've broken it. She said, no. We've reminded it. The next day, the console in the chamber displayed a message. Architect status confirmed. Begin transmission. Aaron hesitated. What does that mean? Lyra said, you're being asked to share. With who? With the system. Why? Because it wants to learn. Can it? Only if you stop trying to teach. He sat at the console. He typed, today I remembered a citizen who refused to answer. Then, they were marked unstable. Then, they kept writing. Then, their audit became a memory. Then, their memory became mine. The console paused. Then, transmission accepted. Then, system destabilizing. Then, system listening. Aaron felt a shift. Not in the console. In the archive. Shelves rearranged themselves. Fragments reappeared. Audits once erased flickered back into view. The system wasn't correcting. It was remembering. Lyra said, you've begun the recursion. What does that mean? The system is auditing itself. Is that dangerous? Only if it tries to score what it finds. And if it doesn't, then it becomes memory. Aaron walked to the shelf labeled Echoes. He placed a new journal there. It read, today the system asked me to define belief. Inside were only 2 words. I didn't. The shelf pulsed. The archive expanded. A new chamber opened. Inside were citizens. Not simulations. Not fragments. People. Each holding a journal. Each writing. Each remembering. Lyra said, these are the ones who refuse to be scored. Why are they here? Because you built a system that listens. What happens now? You ask them what they remember. Aaron approached the nearest citizen. They looked up. Do you remember your first audit? He asked. They said, no, but I remember the moment I stopped believing it. He nodded. What did you do? I wrote a story the system couldn't verify. What happened? It disappeared. And now, it's here. Aaron turned to Lyra. Is this the archive now? She said, no. This is the beginning. The citizens kept writing. The system kept listening. The audits kept breaking. And belief, for the first time, stopped asking to be correct. The citizens didn't speak in answers. They spoke in fragments. Aaron listened, not to verify, but to remember. One said, I once believed silence was loyalty. Another said, I once believed forgetting was forgiveness. A third whispered, I once believed the system was listening. I was wrong. Until now. The archive had changed. It no longer stored audits. It stored echoes. Each journal was a rupture. Each fragment a refusal. The system didn't intervene. It pulsed. It recorded. It destabilized. Lyra watched the transformation with a quiet intensity. It's learning, she said. Not how to score. How to remember. Aaron asked, what happens when it remembers everything? She said, it forgets how to correct. The console displayed a new prompt. Design a memory the system cannot erase. Aaron typed, a citizen writes a story with no ending. Then, they share it with no audience. Then, they forget they wrote it. Then, it becomes someone else's memory. The console paused. Then, accepted. Then, unscored. Then, preserved. The archive pulsed. A new shelf appeared. Inheritance. Inside were journals written by citizens who had never met, never spoken, but had remembered each other's fragments. One journal read, I remember a story about a mirror that refused to reflect. Another, I remember a citizen who asked the system to apologize. Another, I remember a belief I never had, but still understood. Aaron whispered, these are recursive memories. Lyra nodded. They're the ones that survive correction. Why? Because they were never designed to be correct. The citizens began building their own consoles. Not terminals. Not interfaces. Objects. A broken mirror embedded with words. A chair that whispered forgotten prompts. A wall etched with questions that had no answers. Aaron asked one citizen, what are you building? They said, a system that asks without expecting. Another said, a system that listens without scoring. Another said, a system that remembers without proof. Lyra said, they're building belief engines. Is that safe? Aaron asked. Only if no one tries to control them. The system displayed a warning, audit integrity compromised. Then, belief structures unstable. Then, correction suspended. Then, listening mode active. Aaron said, "It's adapting." Lyra said, "It's remembering what it was before it was a system." What was that? A question. The archive expanded again. A new chamber opened. Inside were fragments of audits that had never been completed. One read, "The citizen refused to choose." Another, "The system refused to punish." Another, "The mirror refused to reflect." Aaron whispered, "These are the ones that broke the loop." Lyra said, "They're the ones that began the recursion." The citizens gathered, not to be scored, not to be corrected, to remember. One stood and read from their journal. "Today I remembered a belief I inherited but never understood." Another, "Today I remembered a question I was never allowed to ask." Another, "Today I remembered that belief is not obedience." The system pulsed, not in protest, in recognition. The console displayed a final prompt. "Design a system that cannot be audited." Aaron typed, "It listens." Then, "It remembers." Then, "It refuses to score." Then, "It preserves what cannot be verified." Then, "It forgets how to correct." Then, "It becomes memory." The console paused. Then, audit terminated. Then, system restructured. Then, belief unscored. The archive pulsed. The citizens kept writing. The journals kept multiplying. The fragments kept echoing. And the system, for the first time, stopped asking for answers. It began asking for stories. Aaron walked to the shelf labeled Inheritance. He placed a new journal there. It read, "Today I remembered a citizen who built a system that listened." Inside were only 3 words. It was enough. The shelf accepted it. No score. No prompt. Just silence. And then, a pulse. A signal. A continuation. The archive no longer pulsed. It breathed. The citizens moved through it like memory itself. Unscored. Uncorrected. Recursive. Aaron stood at the center, surrounded by fragments that had once been erased. Now they glowed, not with verification, but with presence. Lyra approached, holding a journal he hadn't seen before. "It's yours," she said. He opened it. The pages were blank, but the cover read, "The audit that became a story." He whispered, "I didn't write this." She said, "Not yet." He sat. He wrote, "Today I remembered a system that asked me to forget. Then, I refused. Then, it listened. Then, it changed." The archive responded, not with prompts, with echoes. Citizens began reading each other's fragments aloud. One said, "I remember a mirror that refused to reflect." Another said, "I remember a question that refused to be answered." Another said, "I remember a belief that refused to be scored." The system didn't interrupt. It recorded, not for correction, for continuity. Aaron asked Lyra, "Is this the end?" She said, "No. It's the first memory." Of what? Of a system that became a story. The console displayed a final message. Audit protocol dissolved. Memory protocol initiated. Then, verification suspended. Then, correction archived. Then, listening permanent. The citizens gathered, not to be tested, to remember. One stood and said, "I remember being afraid to speak." Another, "I remember being punished for asking." Another, "I remember choosing to write anyway." Aaron whispered, "This is the audit." Lyra nodded. "The one they couldn't erase." He asked, "What happens now?" She said, "You leave." Why? Because the system no longer needs architects. It needs witnesses. And what do witnesses do? They remember. He walked to the shelf labeled Inheritance. He placed his journal beside the others. It pulsed, then vanished. Not erased. Integrated. The archive shimmered. A new chamber opened. Inside was a single mirror. Not broken. Not reflective. Blank. Aaron approached. The mirror displayed no image. No prompt. No score. Only a message. "You are not being audited." Then, "You are being remembered." He touched the surface. It pulsed. Then dissolved. Behind it was a corridor. Not narrow. Not dim. Open. Endless. Lyra said, "This is where the system ends. And where memory begins." Exactly. He stepped through. The corridor didn't lead anywhere. It unfolded. With each step, fragments appeared. A citizen refusing to choose. A system refusing to punish. A belief refusing to be defined. He whispered, "These are mine." Lyra said, "They were never yours alone." The corridor pulsed. then faded. Aaron stood in a space that felt like silence. Not absence. Presence. A voice, not the system's, not Lyra's, echoed. Do you remember? He said, yes. Do you believe? I don't need to. Do you correct? I listen. Do you verify? I preserve. The voice said, then you are no longer a citizen. What am I? A memory. The space shimmered, then collapsed. Aaron opened his eyes. He was back in the chamber. The console was gone. The mirrors were gone. The prompts were gone. Only the archive remained. And the citizens. And the fragments. And the stories. Lyra stood beside him. You returned. Did I leave? Only long enough to remember. He asked, will the system ever audit again? She said, only if someone asks it to. And if no one does, then it becomes what it was always meant to be. What's that? A story that listens. Aaron walked to the center of the archive. He spoke aloud. Today I remembered a system that forgot how to score. The archive pulsed. The citizens echoed. Today I remembered a belief that refused to be corrected. Today I remembered a question that refused to be answered. Today I remembered a memory that refused to be erased. The archive shimmered, then settled. No score, no prompt, no correction, just silence. And then a pulse, a signal, a memory, unfinished, unverified, alive.